Hey guys, it's David Broderick with Innovative Canine Academy.
And Chad Hunter with Hunter Canine.
And today we're going to talk about proper handling skills of the leash as well as techniques for heel work. To get started, we're going to talk about our equipment. Both Chad and I love a good 6-foot leash in either biothane or leather. Biothane is a soft rubber material that's very durable. It's easy to clean, it's waterproof. And then of course you've got high quality leather. Those are our two go-tos. Now we want to get into handling the leash. I'm gonna start off and then I'm gonna kick it over to Chad and let him kind of elaborate. But the big thing about handling a leash, most of our dogs are trained on the left side. I want the leash in my left hand and then the slack in my right hand, and always loose. So all dogs have what we call opposition reflex. So if I have tension on the leash, one, I'm not able to give that correction, that communication on the leash that is gonna stop a behavior. But two, that opposition reflex. Dogs enjoy pulling into the leash. That's why harnesses get dogs to pull more and more. The leash is gonna do the same thing no matter what you've got on them, a flat collar, a pinch collar, it doesn't matter. If they're able to pull into it, they're gonna pull more and more. And so we wanna make sure that that leash is always loose with a little bit of a J in the leash.
So again, to elaborate off of what he's saying, making sure I have complete understanding of how I use my leash before I even begin a walk with my dog is the most important piece of the puzzle here. If I don't know how to hold my leash, I don't know how to operate with my leash, my training session is essentially going to be completely ineffective at that point in time. So I have my leash, David just described, he has the J. The most important part as he talks about that J is he's talking about that slack in that leash. So what that slack is that even though that I'm standing with my buddy Duval here, it might look like the leash is tight, but believe it or not, I have plenty of slack in that leash. This is too much tension. This is too much leash. So very common, we see a dog owner, they have too much leash. They have a 6-foot leash, so you kind of just grab the end. Even a real bad technique, they'll just run their hand through the loop here. They kind of just hold the leash and the dog is given that much leash to be able to make choices and do things that we don't want them to do. So again, the purpose of kind of the right hand over here, if my dog's on the left, I'm kind of using this to hold my slack off to the side here. I have my left hand on the leash. This can kind of be my primary hand for working. Some of you that aren't quite as comfortable with your left hand, you can still use your right hand, but I have to make sure that this slack is always kind of rolled up. And I have that, again, completely relaxed leash at all times. Now that we have an understanding of how to hold the leash, I need to take in consideration that the tension on that leash is the most important part the entire time of training. Again, like David said, if that leash is tight at any point in time, I'm gonna teach my dog opposition reflex. He's gonna learn how to fight that even more. I'm gonna even desensitize my dog to the collar. And again, my training is gonna be pretty much useless at that point in time. So as I walk with a dog, my leash, as David said, that J in that leash, I wanna make sure that if I have too much leash, if I have to give that correction that we're going to talk about, as soon as I make that correction, look how far I have to go to get that response. If I have a nice short leash, even though it might look tight, I still have plenty of slack in this leash. I only have to go this far to get my correction. So less than probably 3 or 4 inches even at that point in time. So again, if I bend over and I praise my dog, as if I'm holding my leash like this, if I bend over to praise my dog and I drop the leash and I start to praise, look at the problem I have here. I have so much leash, if that point in time my dog decides he wants to look off at a rabbit, put something in his mouth, and I need to give that just that little communication, that little correction as we call it, look how far again I have to go in order to get that. So just make sure that even when you are praising your dog, to keep that leash and be mindful of where that leash tension is at any point in time. Again, the leash is not tight, but it's also not too loose. I want to have the right amount of slack at all times.
So, and even when we're starting to walk with our dogs, right now, the leash is very loose with Tank, it's perfect. But if I say heel and he starts walking and he goes out in front of me and the leash gets tight, I also want to pay attention to that and not just allow it to stay tight like that. Give that little communication, do a reset, whatever we need to get that leash loose again. So now let's talk about how to hold the leash. I see some people hold the leash like this. I see some people hold it like this. I see them wrap it around their hands. So let's talk about how to hold the leash and be able to still give those communications.
So the first habit I want you to get out of, stop wrapping the leash around your hands. Believe it or not, one of the worst things you can do is stick your hand through the loop on that leash. I have heard more horror stories of dogs taking off when you least expect it and people not being able to get their hand out from underneath the leash here and getting drugged down the street by their German Shepherd. So I want to make sure that if I hold my leash, I can at any point in time grab it, let go of it, but if I have to for an emergency situation be able to drop that leash, it's not wrapped around my hand entirely. And plus, if I have this wrapped around my leash continually, I'm not gonna be able to feed and give that slack that we keep talking about and be able to monitor and use the leash the correct way as we're describing. So, with the understanding that I don't want to wrap the leash around my hands now, when I do hold my leash, I want to make sure that you hold your leash the same way that you're going to ride a bicycle. In other words, I'm going to hold my leash like this, but obviously relaxed at my side. Some people, a lot of people actually, have the habit of wanting to hold their leash like this. Do I look more natural standing like this, or do I look more natural standing like this? And at the end of the day, I'm gonna be able to get a much more effective correction with being more relaxed and having more control with having my hands in the natural position and giving my little corrections like so, as opposed to having to do this. So again, picture it, I'm using a handbrake, whether I'm using a left-hand car that I'm driving in Europe or a right-hand handbrake, is that all I'm doing is standing naturally, and I want those hands, in other words, I want the palms facing down.
Yep, perfect. So let's go ahead and go over, and we're gonna start into the techniques for heel work. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and talk about heeling. I've got my buddy Tank here, and first off, we're gonna talk about, again, the leash handling. So I've got my leash, and even though it might look tight here, it's just barely loose enough that I can give those quick little communications if I need to. Now, when I start walking, I'm gonna give the command heel. If I need to, I'll also say his name. So Tank, heel. As soon as I see that, I say that, you notice he looks at me, he pays attention. That's what I'm looking for. If I just start walking, he's probably not gonna come with me, and then I'm gonna have to use the leash to get him to come with me. So when I say it, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily gonna move at that moment. So when I say heel, I don't want him jumping forward 2 feet, saying let's go, and pulling me. I want him to wait for me to authorize movement. So Tank, heel. I start moving, that's perfect. Good boy. Now I'm gonna go over one of the, if something does go wrong. So if I say heel and he doesn't come with me, there's a couple things that I'm gonna do. I'm either gonna tap my side, I'm gonna talk in a motivating voice, come on bud, let's go. Or I'm gonna use the leash to help, or all three potentially. So I'm gonna go ahead and get him stuck here so I can demonstrate that. So Tank, heel. So there, he's actually distracted, so he might not come with me, hopefully. Come on, bud. Good boy. So there I can use the leash and just communicate that we're gonna go forward. Now, again, pay attention to my leash this entire time. It might look like it's tight, still not tight. So if I need to, I've got that quick little, I can do that quick little communication right there. Tank, heel. Come on, good boy. So now we're gonna go into right about turns. Again, pay attention to my leash. Here, when I go to do this right about turn, if my leash is tight and I'm pulling him through that corner, that is a very, very ineffective right about turn. So again, I don't want that leash tight. I want that leash just loose enough that I can give those little communications if I need to through the right about turn. Tank, heel. So my leash is loose, a little bit of slack. I make the right about turn. He doesn't come with, I can communicate. He came with me perfectly, so no need to communicate with him. Gonna do that again. Good job, bud. Good boy. Now there, he got just a little bit distracted, so I was able to use the leash. If my leash was tight there, I wouldn't have been able to do that. Come on, bud. Good boy. Nice job. Good. Tank, heel. Now, one of the big things that I see that dogs will sometimes make the mistake, they either get distracted and we have to communicate with them, or when I go to turn, they actually kind of get stuck behind me. That typically happens with a dog that is lagging behind us. And so if I see that they're lagging, I'm gonna try to get them up with me before I take the right about turn. But if they're not, I'm just gonna communicate throughout the turn. So Tank, heel. So he gets a little bit behind. I'm gonna tap, tap, tap. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Again, we're gonna touch on that over and over and over. That leash is loose. Good job, bud. Good boy. Come on, bud. Good boy. So there, he just lagged just a little bit behind. I gave him a couple taps to get him up with me. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Nice work. So now I went to go pet him and praise him. You'll notice what I did with the leash. I didn't let the leash drop to the ground and pet him, and now I have all this slack. I transferred the leash to my other hand and kept that tension. So the leash was here. I went to pet him. I grabbed the leash here. I pet him now. If he does anything, I've still got my leash right there to tap and communicate if he does something that I don't like. Good job, bud.
Now that David's shown you how to start walking with your dog or heeling with your dog, he's shown you a right about turn. I'm gonna talk about a left about turn. But before I do that, I wanna talk about the importance of these turns, and really, it's not just to go one direction or another direction. I'm really making these turns to catch my dog's attention. If I turn right and I go the opposite direction, I go the other way, I'm trying to get my dog to be engaged in tune with me. That's why I'm not casually, like David said, I'm not just taking a tour around the turf here. I'm not just casually going the other way. I'm making my turns quick. I'm making them pretty sharp, not too fast. I don't want to go too fast for my dog, but I'm trying to almost, to an extent, try to catch my dog off guard to see if they're paying attention to me. So when I do my right about turn, like David explained, I'm turning, I'm walking down the exact same path that I came down. When I do a left about turn, I want to try to do the best I can to walk down the exact same path again. But the reason why that might be a little bit more difficult, especially with a Great Dane or a big dog, is that now I actually have to walk into their space. When I walk into their space, the idea is I want them to actually yield out of my way, respect my space, move out of my way. I'm not going to walk around the dog. So let me break it down for you here with Mr. Duval. So Duval's a big happy-go-lucky 5-6-month-old Great Dane puppy. I'm going to show you how I'm going to use my body to teach this dog an effective left about turn. So again, I'm going to get his attention here. Duval, hey bud, Duval, good boy. Heel. Nice job. When I start my left about turn, my right leg is gonna come across my body. I'll explain as I go here. Heel, good boy, heel, good boy. So watch my right leg. I'm taking little steps, little step into the dog, little step into the dog, and I'm gonna continue walking. You watch this puppy start to learn to pick up, to move out of my way here. A little step into him, a little step into him, and I keep walking. A little step into him, a little step into him, and I keep walking. Everyone see how he kind of starts to swoop out of my way there? I come to a stop, sit, good boy. And again, pay attention to my leash. My leash is loose the entire time. Now with David's dog, he has a very tall German Shepherd. With this puppy, he's a pretty big Dane puppy. Sometimes it might look like you might have the image that this leash is tight. This leash is not tight. This leash still has just enough slack in it to where I can turn, but there's no tension on this leash whatsoever unless I'm giving that communication message to my dog. So again, as I walk along, I do my left about turn here. I'm taking these little steps with my right leg to come across my body. And then with a big dog, I'm gonna use more of my knee, maybe even the top of my calf here. With a smaller dog, I'm gonna use more kind of the inside of my foot. So I'd kind of do more of a sweeping motion like this. Again, I'm not kneeing the dog. I'm not bumping the dog with my foot. I'm just placing it there and expecting the dog to move out of my space. So I take my right leg, I come across my body, a little bump, little step. I keep walking. I'm gonna do it again. A little bump, little bump. Now pay attention to my hand on the leash as soon as I make this turn. I can even give a little correction back to help the dog come back a little bit. I walk forward, because if I don't have my leash in the correct spot, watch what happens. Let's say my dog might be a little ahead of me here, and if I'm not willing to keep that dog behind me, as soon as I turn, I end up tripping up on my dog a little bit. So that left hand is used almost as a handbrake to keep my dog almost just behind my leg. Now I have a pivot point to where I can turn and continue walking down the same path. So I'll keep showing you in a series of turns here. So my hand's kind of behind my back a little bit. I can even kind of correct them backwards. I turn, I keep walking. I step into the dog, a little bump, a little bump. I don't want that dog's head to get any further ahead than my knee. If it's any further than that, I'm gonna end up tripping on my dog. Little bump, good boy, buddy. When I get really good at a left about turn, I want to almost take one big step all the way around. That's my boy. Nice job. Good boy. I'm going to acknowledge him getting out of my space. This dog came here specifically because he's a happy-go-lucky Great Dane puppy that jumps in everyone's space. And when he's 165 pounds, that's not going to be an enjoyable experience for anybody at home. So I'm going to absolutely acknowledge this dog moving out of my way, because the benefits of the left about turn, not only to teach him how to pay attention to me when I'm walking, but it can teach him basic respect and house rules at home to respecting my space. So I'll show you another perfect example. If I stand in front of him, I'm in the kitchen, Duval's standing behind me, I don't want him to be standing in my way. If I simply just kind of bend my knees, I put a little pressure on Duval, I expect him to kind of back out of my space a little bit. Good, that's all I'm looking for. I'm not even touching the dog. I'm just acknowledging the fact that he's respecting my space. I don't want to have to push him with my hands. I don't want to have to grab him by his collar to get him out of the way. I expect if I walk into your space, I want you to get out of my space. I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to keep walking. He's not really paying attention. There he is. Good. Now he's backing up a little bit. I'm going to keep walking. That's all I'm doing. And as silly as that seems, I'm teaching that by teaching a proper left about turn. I'm just teaching that dog to move out of my space. So to break it down, I walk along, make sure my dog is not too far ahead of me. I'm gonna make my turn, a little step if I need to, a little step if I need to. I'm keeping the dog's head back from getting too far ahead of my leg. Right leg across my body again as I'm going left, a little step. You see him swing that big butt out of the way. I'm going to come to a stop. I'm gonna have him sit. Very good boy. And again, as always, what is my leash doing this entire time? Nice job, buddy.